We are the descendants of heroes and dissidents, of truth-sayers and freedom fighters. We inherit this legacy, too, of writers who have been silenced for their speech, whose books are banned and burned, whose bodies are rotting currently in prison cells in Egypt, in Iran, Cuba, China, Sudan, Argentina, India, Palestine, and more. Our ability to practice our craft with total freedom and safety is a luxury not afforded to all of us, and this privilege comes with responsibilities. We're not just playing around on the page, building sandcastles to escape into. At the very least, we have an obligation to examine the material circumstances under which our work is produced, consumed, and celebrated. It is through this dual citizenship that we gather tonight to protest the art washing of the ongoing Palestinian genocide through the largest prize for fiction in Canada, the Giller, currently holding an award ceremony across the street. When we say that this $100,000 prize is sponsored by Scotiabank, and that Scotiabank has a $112 million stake in Elbit Systems, more than 60 times bigger than its nearest Canadian rival, this is not a metaphor. We are talking about real money. When we say that Elbit Systems is the primary provider of the Israeli military's land-based equipment and unmanned aerial vehicles, this is not a metaphor. We are talking about real weapons. When we say that the Israeli state has killed so many thousands in Gaza that the estimated death toll ranges from 43,000 to 186,000 to 335,000, this is not a metaphor. We are talking about real lives. When we say that close to 70% of Gaza's civilian casualties have been women and children, with most of the dead between the ages of 5 and 9 years old, this is not a metaphor. It takes no stretch of the imagination to understand how Scotiabank benefits from attaching itself so loudly, so proudly, and with so much fanfare to literature instead of the arms supplier of a genocidal military. What is not clear is why writers would sell their dissent so cheaply when it is the most valuable thing we have. As Daniel Serra so eloquently said at the last Lit Responds book club, we are all complicit in 100 ways we know and about 100 more we don't know. Each of us acting alone can have very little material impact, but through collective action, we have the power to shape this industry we belong to. We are here tonight because we are not cowardly enough to deny CanLit's complicity in the Palestinian genocide and not cynical enough to believe we cannot change it. We are not stupid enough. It has already changed, and there's no going back. Tonight, writers, bookworkers, editors, publishers, we've all gathered in Halifax, Fredericton, Winnipeg, Montreal, Vancouver, and here in Toronto for a beautiful night of remembering who we are and what we are capable of. Before you hear from our wonderful readers, comic artist and fellow organizer Michael DeForge will be reminding us what this year's campaign has achieved.
Continuance. Every month, a new month. I wake up and start running. I wake up and my face is small and numb. If you make it to mile 10, you can make it to anything. My arms refuse everything. My brother died in January. The kitchen sink was emptied of clutter. The bedroom light needed replacing. I am afraid of stairways, the fragility of children, my mother's hands, their gentle reach toward me. For hours, I lose empathy for anything that moves. Lessons learned. You can build a garden and weeds will bloom. You can speak of joy and your heart will bleed. The sun will rotate and you'll hate it. Dear Allah, I am writing to you in green, and there are children under the rubble. The boy gasps, I am alive. I am alive. I am alive and useless as ivy. The students are tear-gassed. A pig looks at me and smiles. I daydream of smashing his head into the sidewalk. I daydream of bombs in the sky murdering the President of the United States. I sleep with the lights on, shake until my eyes force close. To be alive is to be a wound collecting sorrows. I tell my lover I have tried every version of grief like a new pair of socks. Once a dispatcher asked me, is there a gun at the residence? The gun is in my mouth, I tell her. I've been holding it here for years. But I keep getting distracted. But I keep collecting days. To continue is a mercy. To continue is to think, if I end this life, would I miss this life? And then walk into the ocean, your grief a dog on a leash, your grief an Olympic swimmer racing you to the soft center of everyone you love.
I'll be reading from a book that I haven't stopped thinking about since I finished it, Adoniya Shibley's Minor Detail, which has been translated into English from Arabic by Elizabeth Jacquette. I chose this passage because it references Canada Park, a national park built by the Israeli state over Palestinian land that was captured and razed during the Six-Day War in 1967. The park was established with millions of dollars donated by Canadians, and the road leading to the park is named after former Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker. So I encourage everyone to think about the ways in which conservation can function as a cover for occupation here and abroad. I continue driving on Road 443, still on the alert, and before long I catch sight of another checkpoint ahead. My heartbeats echo in my skull, and something akin to a torn spiderweb dances in front of my eyes. I get closer to the checkpoint. I have to cross it. The soldiers lined up around it do not seem concerned with stopping anyone, probably including me. I shouldn't slow down very much. I must trust that I'll get through. And I do. After the checkpoint, however, my confidence dissipates completely, and I'm no longer sure where I am. I can't tell whether I've taken this road before, as I'd thought at first, or not. The road I'd been familiar with until a few years ago was narrow and winding, while this one is quite wide and straight. Walls 5 meters high have been erected on either side, and behind them are many new buildings, clustered in settlements that hadn't existed before or were hardly visible, while most of the Palestinian villages that used to be here have disappeared. I scan the area with eyes wide open, searching for any trace of these villages and their houses, which were freely scattered like rocks on the hills and were connected by narrow, meandering roads that slowed at the curves. But it's in vain. None of them can be seen anymore. The further I drive, the more disoriented I become, until, off to the left, I see another road that has been closed. And at this point, I realize that I've taken that road before, dozens of times. It's blocked off now by a mound of dirt and several massive concrete blocks, but it once led to Al-Jib villages. I stop the car where the roads intersect, step down, and approach the heap of dirt and concrete blocking it, to be completely sure that it exists and cannot be moved, and that neither my car nor any other car can drive around it. It's pretty, the road to Al-Jib, the way it leans left and right, crossing hills dotted with olive trees and little villages wrapped in quiet, to Beit Eksa. I go back to the car, open the Israeli map, and again study the route that Israelis usually take to the coast. So, after descending to the bottom of the valley on Highway 50, one must turn right onto Highway 1 and stay on it for a long time without turning right or left. I examine the area along Highway 1, which, according to the map, appears to be primarily populated by settlements. The only two visible Palestinian villages are Abu Ghosh and Ain Rafah. I go back and open the map, which depicts Palestine until 1948, and let my eyes wander over it, moving between the names of the many Palestinian villages that were destroyed after the expulsion of their inhabitants that year. I recognize several of them. Some of my colleagues and acquaintances originate from there. From the villages of Lifta, Al-Kastal, Ain Karem, Al-Malha, Al-Jura, Abu Shusha, Siris, Inaba, Jimzu, and Dair Tarif. But the majority of the names are unfamiliar to me, to the extent that they invoke a feeling of estrangement. Kirbat al-Amur, Bir Ma'in, Al-Burj, Kirbat al-Buwaira, Beit Shana, Salbit, Al-Kubab, Al-Kanisa, Karuba, Kirbat Zakaria, Baria, Deir Abu Salama, Al-Na'ani, Jindas, Hadatha, Abu al-Fadl, Kisla, and many others. I look at the Israeli map again. A very large park called Canada Park now extends over the area where all these villages used to be. I fold the maps, start the engine, and set off toward Highway 50, and encountering no barriers this time, I turn onto the really long highway. and after continuing on it for a while, I start to descend the mountains of Jerusalem, heading, according to the signs, toward the Ben Shemen interchange, whose original name may have been Beit Susin, named after a nearby village which appears on the map from 1948 and which no longer exists. All that is left, all that hasn't been destroyed, is a single house, and I catch a glimpse of it on my left, surrounded by cypress trees and with grass growing through the stones.
The human animal formerly known as I will become a person. I'll take on a shape you could recognize at first sight, something that doesn't startle or stutter, something that doesn't gaze unblinking at something unmoving, refusing or unwilling, far in the distant past or future. Wouldn't you like to know? I'll give you something easy to read. Everyone says my eyes remind them of prey species. So large, turned down at the corners, and even in my childhood photos, my irises are a black so deep, no light reflects, no pupil, just so cute you could just bite my head off in one go. People like clear lines, clean walls, a delineation between the people's border and something else I know. You're comforted by rigidity. It's something easy to lean on. Could you imagine being something? Human animal, how could I ever ask for better? If I could only sink to the ground, taste soil with my fingertips and not fear what lies beneath nor flinch, because the body knows by instinct the things that crawl and scratch and draw blood. They are my brothers. They mean me no harm. Human animal, could I dream of anything more? To feel something true to the bone between my teeth, only what I can catch, only what I deserve, because I came by it honestly. Blood tastes like forgiveness. Because I am human, I only eat what I've disguised. Human animals do not mince words, do not choke on air, do not let things die beneath their every footstep, because the land remembers my shape. Could I live without hurting others? I grind my teeth at night. I'm sorry. It's the only thing I can do.
We are over 1 year and 1 month and 1 week into the genocide Israel has been carrying out in Gaza. And when we see photographs of demolished homes and demolished hospitals, of scorched human skin, of countless displaced Palestinians, that is Elbit Systems munitions at work. Munitions that have historically included internationally banned white phosphorus and cluster bombs. When Palestinians in Gaza broadcast the genocide to the world and have to shout over the deafening noise of drones hovering above them, those are Elbit Systems drones at work. Elbit Systems provides 85% of the military drones to Israel. Indigo Books is also a sponsor of the Giller Prize. Its CEO, Heather Reisman, makes appearances in Giller publicity and broadcasts as part of her attempt to secure a public image as Canada's book lover-in-chief. Gerald Schwartz and Heather Reisman both recently took the book monopoly private. They are now the owners and overseers of Indigo. Schwartz and Reisman are also founders of the Hessig Foundation. Hessig has provided millions of dollars in funding and scholarships for non-Israeli citizens who enlist in the Israeli military. The colloquial term for these foreign mercenaries is lone soldiers, something Hessig has used to advertise. They were formerly known as the Hessig Fund for Lone Soldiers. Schwartz and Reisman are the only significant funders of Hessig. They've provided over $185 million of their own funds to the foundation over the years, which means Indigo's profits are directly being used by Reisman and Schwartz to fund a genocidal military, a process that is subsidized by Canadian tax dollars. Heather Reisman has abused the court system to try to silence criticism of Hessig. In November 2023, 11 activists were arrested for their alleged involvement in flyering an Indigo location in protest of Hessig. The arrestees were publicly smeared and were subjected to violent, no-knock, early morning raids. 7 of them are still facing criminal charges, while 4 have already had their cases dropped as they were dismissed by the Crown as being groundless. These severe, overreaching charges were only laid after a personal phone call was made from Heather Reisman's phone directly to the Toronto Chief of Police. This September, Indigo successfully won a court injunction against the domain name of the political campaign Indigo Kills Kids, using copyright law to strike a precedent-setting blow on freedom of expression and political speech in Canada. Shame. And lastly, the Giller Prize is sponsored by the Israeli Foundation. The Israeli Foundation is the charitable counterpart to Israeli real estate company, the Israeli Group. The Israeli Group was founded by its namesake, the now deceased David Azrieli. David Azrieli served under the 7th Brigade of the Zionist militia, the Haganah, and directly took part in the Nakba in 1948. The 7th Brigade was particularly notorious for war crimes it committed, including an Operation Hiram, which oversaw the ethnic cleansing of multiple Palestinian villages and left an estimated number of 400 Palestinian civilian deaths. The Israeli Foundation carries on this legacy of displacement and death with its past and present investments in West Bank settlements deemed illegal under international law. This includes the previous ownership of the Sonal gas station chain, which operates on illegal settlements, and their current stake in Bank Leumi, which does business and funds the infrastructure for these illegal settlements. Bank Leumi also recently froze the bank account of UNRWA, contributing to the suspension of relief funds for Palestinian refugees. The Israeli Foundation has also donated to Im Tertzu, the far-right Israeli settler advocate group currently involved in blocking aid to Gaza, a donation that Haaretz credited with quadrupling the fascist group's funds the year it happened. Here in Toronto, they are donors to anti-Palestinian lobbying group Honest Reporting Canada, notorious for doxing and harassing journalists and healthcare workers, and responsible for anti-Palestinian incitement. Shame. On July 10th, authors with 2024 books eligible for the Giller Prize started a boycott, withdrawing their books from prize consideration until the Gillers dropped Scotiabank, Indigo, and the Israeli Foundation as sponsors. Past Giller winners and nominees joined them in solidarity, pledging not to participate in any Giller programming or publicity. Last month, that picket line was expanded to all Canadian authors for all future years until the Giller submits to all 3 demands, and that picket line is now 300 plus strong.
This poem is called Everything Knows You Will Rise. Now you are alone, says the wall that comes at night. There will be no knocks at the door, no pats on the shoulder. The roads that led to your dreams lie shattered, splayed like corpses on the arid ground. The paths you once crossed without fear to meet siblings and neighbors, when seasons were rough, when life was hard and dry, are clogged by stone, unfulfillment, and dark intent. The bridges that shined in the memories of your fathers fell in wadis that dried long ago. Expect no one from there now, but everything knows you will rise. The time is gone when far-off dust signaled comings and goings, siblings on the road, or a letter from your family. The dust you see now is the destruction of your houses and the homes of your family there. The smoke past the hill is not caravans of people returning. It is the torching of your uncle's fields and the orchards you once exulted in. No dreams can grow in these vessels you gathered and kept, but everything knows you will rise. You have no siblings left, only this desert you gained, where you were thrown, this desert fed by your endurance. It advanced in your silence. The wall each time brings the past, the wall in place of the road. The wall seeps through rooms and windows, enters bedrooms bearing the scream. Then it throws on the lodgings and beds, on the shrouds of boys and girls. You have no siblings left, now you are alone, but everything knows you will rise.